negotiations, and I began to understand the business. One day, a salesperson called in sick while we were short-handed. The manager remembered what I had said during the interview and told me that he was giving me a chance to prove myself. I was nervous and my palms were sweaty. I remembered stuttering in front of the customers until I calmed myself down. To everyone's surprise, I sold my first car that day. And then another the day after. By the next 2 weeks, I had outsold some of the dealership's regular salespeople. I worked at the dealership for 9 years, being the top salesperson until I took the biggest risk of my life. I used my savings I had saved up to start my own car dealership. It was a modest start, but I was determined. Using innovative sales strategies and focusing on customer satisfaction, my business began to grow. Word of mouth spread, and before I knew it, I was competing with the bigger dealerships. I expanded into other areas and always looked for new opportunities. Recently, I had a young gentleman walked into my showroom one afternoon. I asked if he was looking to purchase a car, in which he responded that he was looking for a job. I ended up recognizing him after a couple of seconds. It was my brother. You can now check if there's a part 2 by pressing share and more. My family disowned me for being poor. Now all of them work for me, part 2. I had sudden flashbacks about my family, and all those years I spent forgetting about the past just came all over me. I remembered my childhood, and the differences in how we were treated. Yet, it seemed like my brother didn't seem to recognize me. After all, the last time he had seen me was when I didn't have a full-grown beard and a little chubby. I asked about his experiences and why he wanted to work here. He told me that he was looking for a way to support his parents after their restaurant went bankrupt. I asked if he had a degree, in which he said that he was a college dropout. Despite the anger I have felt in the years of how my parents treated me, I didn't feel any satisfaction in seeing them suffering. Instead, I felt sad. I offered my brother a job, not just out of pity, but because I believed that he could have been something more. My brother was a quick learner, and he had the skill of understanding people and getting along with them. This trait made him an excellent salesperson. Watching him grow and thrive was a bittersweet moment for me. My mother recently visited the dealership one morning to drop my brother some lunch. You know how mothers will always know their kids? Well, my brother decided to introduce me, and all it took was a couple of seconds to realize I was her oldest. Her eyes started tearing up and she came to me with a hug. I stood there in silence, trying to hold in my tears. My mother looked at my little brother, who looked confused, and asked him who I was. My mother told him that I was his older brother. My brother's confusion turned into astonishment and then joy. He hugged me as well, and it felt like I had my family back. We sat down at my office, and my mother, still wiping tears, began to apologize for everything. She explained how after I left, things started going downhill for them. My father's restaurant struggled to keep afloat after all the financial troubles and eventually had to shut down. They were too proud to reach out to me. My brother, feeling the weight of the golden child, cracked under pressure and dropped out of college. He got accepted to a top university but realized that there were far smarter people than him, and the people made him look below average. My mother asked if I wanted to meet my father, and I told them yes. After work, I entered the small, cluttered apartment where my parents now lived. Memories flooded back, a lot of happy memories but also a lot of pain and disappointment. I saw my father, who was a towering figure of authority, now looked frail and worn. We stood there awkwardly until my father spoke. His words cracked and he simply said, "I'm sorry." His eyes brimmed with tears and he told me that he apologized for the way he has always treated me growing up. In that moment, I felt something shift and I wanted to forgive him. I embraced my father and I told him that it was okay, and that all of us should move on from this. From that day forward, our relationship began to mend. We talked, laughed, and cried. We shared stories and memories and we began to rebuild our relationship. I offered my parents jobs at the dealership. My father, once a proud restaurateur, brought his experience into managing the dealership's operations and ended up finding a new passion in the process. My mother, with a sense of understanding people, became a part of the customer service team. She was often praised by customers for her warmth and care. As for my brother, he continued thriving in sales, and he was on the way of becoming one of our top employees. In the end, my family and I rebuilt our relationship together. It's never too late, and I'm thankful my brother connected me back with them after all these years.